Choujinki Metalder, called Neros analysis. God Neros is one of the most well-known characters of Toku history, inspired by the anti-war, anti-army, anti-government themes of Shotaro Ishinomori's Kakaider, inspired by growing up in Japan post-war. Metalder's nemesis is a war profiteer. Neros has very little to be liked about him. Spoilers alert, he kills Koga, the creator of Metalder, who's a peace lover, trying to save the world. Neros has multiple opportunities to create the destruction of Earth to favor him in situations. He mind controls Mai's father into fighting Metalder in one of the darkest moments of the series. He became powerful through the power of the United States gangsters. Also note that the United States took over Japan. Singapore is brought along for the mix as well. Yet in the end, despite the fact that God Neros has ruined the world and probably destroyed it, there are a lot of interesting notes in the end of the episode and series. Like what Rob Bagger said about making Germans and Saving Private Ryan absolutely evil and not suffer during their deaths, Metalder does the exact opposite. God Neros has one of the most gruesome deaths in Toku history, despite him being one of the worst possible villains. This could possibly be because the fans get a good payoff in the end, but I debate it's not. First, Metalder throws a sword and hits him, and it hits God Neros. And his reaction, he feels pain. He's not a god, as he says in his name. Doesn't look cool or badass, as if you were Terminator or Rambo, even though this is the 80s where he's a bad guy. Just blow him up, make it family friendly and enjoyable. But they don't. He's a bad guy who exploits charities so he can make money off them to make weapons and create more suffering in the world as a result of something that should provide a lot of happiness or last moment lack of pain. God Neros grunts. It's a human grunt he makes. He isn't played off as a superhuman. He's vulnerable. He's no devil after all. And he already had the upper hand on a cyborg who isn't alive, whose life is fading before his eyes, and shouldn't have any more. God Neros' Clark Kent is an actual human persona, unlike Metalder. Now, there's a bit of interesting stuff in the final blow on God Neros. My first reaction was that the ending wasn't dark enough, because it wasn't clear what happened to both Metalder or Neros. Was Metalder truly lobotomized? What's Metalder's fate? Where will he hide? Will Ruse live on? And Neros' death is interesting as well. Neros' death is censored, so I sort of reacted as a guy in my 80s. From the 80s. Why did they censor it for such a dark moment? He's decapitated. Again, first off, the decapitation is very seen. It censors it. There's no moment where you feel like, wow, there's a huge ass Death Star explosion. Like, there's no real time for you to react to the death before we get to Neros' aftermath of possibly destroying the Earth. Now, I started to humanize him as we don't see the body or see a funeral for Neros or get any time for empathy. But I think that was sort of the point. Like, just move on and, like, you sort of get that feeling where he doesn't give a moment where he feels human again, even though you just got that moment where he was human, which I think is even more valuable to the story of the Choujinki Metalder plot. No one figures out what happens to the rest of the army and generals and crime syndicate, but we can also fill in the blanks. Also, how they shot the decapitation of God Neros was sort of like witnessing a guillotine of the French Revolution. You don't see the head, and we hope it's painless, but it's sort of like the effect as if we had closed our eyes during the guillotine and execution in a barbaric state. This is all done after he makes that rather sympathetic, humanizing grunt full of vulnerability. This whole thing is very tokusatsu-like, where explosions are edited in to bad guys to make it seem really awesome. Also, like pulling out an organ and making it explode, making it very hard to, very unsaving Private Ryan-like, where you don't feel the suffering of the bad guys and actually enjoy seeing the suffering. Like cinematic sadists we are. Metalder kills off a human being in the end, opposed to a god, although what Metalder wants is to be human. And those are my thoughts on the ending of God Neros and Choujinki Metalder.